And then I'll gavel it in, and then we'll start this thing.
I'm ready.
All right. Good evening. It's Tuesday, February 22nd. This is the Stoughton City Council meeting, and this is going to be a hybrid meeting. So we have some people in the council chambers, and we have some people in the warmth of their homes. So welcome, everybody. Hopefully you can hear us okay. This will be a work in progress, but I think we're in pretty good shape. I want to thank the IT department before we get started for getting us set up here. And having said all that, we'll begin with the roll call.
Okay. Caravello.
Here.
Doom.
Here.
Hiley. Hirsch.
Here.
Hunt.
Here.
Jensen.
Here.
Lagaki. Moving on. Mayeski. Reeves. Here. Schumacher.
Here.
Tukalski.
Here.
And Venegas.
Here.
Okay, we have 10 alders present and 2 are absent at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Minutes and reports are in the packet. Item number 3 is our public comment period. We do have one person signed up to speak, and that would be Lawrence. If you want to introduce yourself, you have 3 minutes to speak, and thank you for being here tonight.
Hi, thank you for having me. Hi everyone, my name is Lawrence Knez. I'm a representative from Dame for Dogs. Dame for Dogs is a grassroots organization.
We can't hear him.
Can you
Can you
speak
hear me?
just a little louder, Lawrence? I can barely hear you.
Yeah, let me see. Zoom likes to mess with you on your audio settings.
Thank you. Don't worry, we'll start the 3 minutes over.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
That's perfect.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you once again for your time. My name is Lawrence Knez. I'm a representative from Dame for Dogs, a grassroots organization working to stop dogs and cats from being bred to be used for painful experimentations. We appreciate your consideration in passing Ordinance 05-2022. This ordinance is to prevent a facility from setting up a location in Stoughton that breeds cats and dogs for the purpose of painful experimentation, more commonly known as puppy mills. In the community of Spring Green, there was an application for a conditional use permit to set up a puppy mill in a residential neighborhood. After many local residents voiced their grave concerns about how this puppy mill would have a significant negative impact on the neighborhood and the community of Spring Green, the board denied the conditional use permit. A year or so later, the city of Spring Green has now lost a long legal battle and is required to issue a conditional use permit since there was no ordinance in place to protect them like the one being presented, 05-2022. Many communities saw how local Spring Green residents fought long and hard to prevent this facility from being set up in the residential neighborhood and the long legal battle that Spring Green went through and lost. So now multiple Dane County communities have passed this ordinance to protect themselves from ending up like Spring Green, and we recommend that the city of Stoughton does so as well to protect their community. Furthermore, as indicated on the agenda, the Plan Commission unanimously recommended the approval of Ordinance 05-2022 on February 14th, 2022. I appreciate your time and consideration of passing this ordinance and hope everybody is safe and healthy.
All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is communications and presentations. Are there any communications from council members? Okay, I'm hearing none. I'll just briefly mention a few things that are going on. We did receive the other day an annexation request for what we call the Tigan Farm for development. We had a first look at it at the Plan Commission meeting and also at Park and Rec. I'm planning on doing a presentation at the next city council meeting, and I would include a map of that during my presentation. Also, we continue to work on the 51 West. We're working through some items looking to get closer to a developer's agreement. And then we're also, moving forward with Kurt Brink and his team. It looks like Kurt's here tonight. So we'll continue conversations to keep that project moving forward. And I'll ask council members one last time in case anything has come up while I've been speaking. All right, seeing none. We do have a guest tonight. Chris Valchef from True North Consulting is here, and he's going to give us an update on the environmental status down on the Riverfront development site. And then when Chris is done with his presentation, certainly he'll be available to answer any questions that council members may have. Chris, if you're ready, the floor is yours. If you need to share your screen, you should have the ability to do that.
Thanks, Mayor Swadley. Thank you all city council members for having me here tonight as well. I wanted to give you guys an update on what's going on from the DNR's perspective with the Riverfront development project that Kurt Brink and team are putting together, and we're assisting with that as well. So we submitted 2 reports back in October. The Public Works building area for the former Stoughton Public Works building, we submitted a site investigation report, and we also submitted a material management plan for the entire Riverfront development project. We got responses back, typical responses from the DNR. They need a little bit more information, and we need to provide that response to them. As a result of some of that, however, we have kind of run into a snag, and that comes from some additional sampling that was being done out there in conjunction with some geotechnical work that was being done for the stormwater ponds. So there were 4 test pits that were advanced at the southern end of the mill fab property that were being done for geotechnical purposes for the stormwater design. And while they were out there, True North came along and collected some additional samples for laboratory analysis for approval of disposal of materials from the site at the landfill. The landfill has a very specific set of requirements, the analytical requirements that we needed to collect these additional samples that would be representative of things that were being disposed at the landfill. As a result, we ended up finding something that had not been identified previously at the MilFab site. That something is called pentachlorophenol. Pentachlorophenol is basically a wood preservative. It's a pesticide and a wood preservative, but most commonly it's used as a wood preservative on utility poles and railroad ties and wharf pilings, that sort of thing. The results that we found in one of the test pits was extraordinarily high. We went back and looked at why it might have been found there. And we believe that it has, there was a railroad spur that ran through that portion of the site, and we believe that that is the source of it. Where the snag is that this data is indicative of a quote-unquote new release or a new condition at the MilFab property, and we need to incorporate that into the material management plan for the entire property. The problem is that in order for us to incorporate that, we also need to have it delineated at the property, or at least in the areas that we are going to be addressing during the first phase of development. So where that puts us at this point is, well, let me back up a second. The city of Stoughton has a local unit of government agreement with the DNR, which basically says that the city is not responsible for doing remediation efforts at the MilFab site. And as a result of that, the DNR can't, require that additional investigation be done, but they also can't approve a material management plan until we know where this stuff is and how it is impacting it. The other thing that we found in that test pit was elevated concentrations of some volatile organics and some PAHs, which had been found in some areas at the site, but not at the concentrations that we were finding in these test pits, at least specifically at one of the test pits, two of the test pits. So we're at a point where we can't get the material management plan approved until we get some of this area defined, so that when we come back with the management of that material, the DNR then is comfortable with, we're going to be addressing the area that is of concern and not leaving behind things that might be a problem in the future. What else did I want to say? Again, I think that having looked at this, I'm of a belief that the pentachlorophenol is from the rail spur that was there. We don't know that for a fact, but it would not be surprising to me. And based on the other samples that we have out there from the other two test pits that weren't near the rail spur, it makes sense that it is from that rail spur area. The elevated PAHs and volatile organic compounds that we found out there in this test pit were found in other areas, but not quite at the concentrations that we were looking at. So it seems to be somewhat limited in extent, but again, we don't know that. And the DNR is not going to allow us to pull together or approve a material management plan until we have a little bit more data to define that extent of those items in this around that test pit. So where this all puts us is that we're kind of in a with the DNR, they're in a holding pattern until we can provide them with more information and a revised material management plan. And we're going to need to collect more samples out there to get that information and compile that into a report to the DNR in order to get their approval. And I know that everybody's talking about timelines, and honestly, right now we're expecting to come up with the scope of work that we need to come up with and get it on the drilling schedule and collect the samples and have the lab analyzed. We're talking about 1 or 2 months, with the biggest reason being the drilling is probably 3 weeks out before we can get someone out there, and then 2 weeks for laboratory analysis. So that's already almost a month and a half of time. After that, putting it into the report and getting it into the DNR, roughly a month to do that. So we're looking 3 to 4 months would be an aggressive schedule to get this done and get a response back from the DNR. We're hoping that's something that can be done, but we won't know until we can get on the schedule and see how we can pull these things together. And then it will also be dependent upon the data that we find. One of the hurdles that we're coming with the pentachlorophenol is not something that we can field screen for, at least not easily. So the volatiles, we have, mobile equipment that we can go out there with and have a fairly confident, be fairly confident that we have reached an extent or we don't need to go any further, almost immediately. With the pentachlorophenol, it's not as easy because there are no field instruments that are specific to that field observations, if you will. So depending on how that goes, they may require us to do another round of sampling out there in order to really kind of narrow in on where this stuff is. And that's what we'll need in order to put together that material management plan. Mayor Schwadley, I think that's all I've got. I'm open for questions.
All right, thank you for the update. Council members, who would like to ask the first question? President Hirsch, and then Alderperson Hunt will be second.
So, Chris, thank you for keeping us updated. I was wondering if you have a map that you can put up of where you're thinking the PCP is actually located and where you're planning on doing additional sampling. I don't know if you have a map that could show that. I mean, just to give us an idea of the extent of further sampling and where you're thinking the concentration actually is.
Yeah, I am. Here we go. So this is very rough. I'm trying. Can you guys see my screen or no? Oh wait, here.
Here, it's starting to load now. There it is. Thank you.
All right. So it's kind of hard to see because this is two maps kind of layered on top of each other, but you can kind of see this is 4th Street on the left and South Street up along the top end here. This is the river along the bottom. These blue dots are the test pit locations that were completed. These other 3 borings are borings that had been done historically out there for geotechnical purposes. And then in the background, you can I highlighted the rail spur areas that we know about at the site. And that comes from the most recent Sanborn fire insurance map, which was 1949. And you can kind of see that this rail spur here, one of them dead ends here, and the other one continues on down around the corner towards this. Must have been a railroad bridge here at one point, way back in 1949. But anyhow, this test pit, and again, it's not perfect because I don't have a way of scaling the 2 maps together just yet. I put this together this afternoon to try and give us some idea, but this test pit here is where we found the pentachlorophenol, and these 2 are where we found the elevated concentrations of PAHs and VOCs. So right now, I think the plan that we're kicking around would be to investigate along this railroad spur on both sides of it to make sure that we, don't have the pentachlorophenol issue. And it may not extend all the way. It's going to be somewhat dependent upon what we find in the field. I mean, we do have some indication of the material that this sample came out of. It's not perfect, but it does give us something. And so, if we get to this point down here and the material that we found in this test pit is significantly different, then we might stop in this area. But it's going to be kind of hit and miss. So this is the area that we're looking at right now for the pentachlorophenols. The VOCs, based on the data that we got from all these black dots over here, we think that there might be a source of VOCs that are problematic for people in this general vicinity. So I think that we'll end up, I think this boring here was fine. So maybe it's in this area where that source is. But we'll have these maps scaled together and figure out, where exactly we're going to do that when we come up with a scope of work to kind of work through the two issues.
So Chris, on this map, there's other red lines. Were they also all railroad or only that spur?
These red lines are spurs. These are also spurs.
So would you be testing in those other areas as well?
We will likely want to do some testing along this spur because it would affect the street reconstruction. Again, depending on what we find, we may not go up this direction. You know, my gut feeling for this elevated concentration is that they happen to hit exactly on top of the old rail spur line, and very likely could have had a piece of the railroad timber in the sample when it was submitted. Again, the concentration that we found in that is significantly higher than anything that we've seen at other sites with pentachlorophenol issues.
And as that was the old mill fab site that does woodwork, hopefully
Yeah.
it's not going to be.
So a little bit about the pentachlorophenol. So it started to be used as a preservative in the mid 1930s, roughly, and it is used specifically was used for utility poles, the cross members for utility poles, railroad timbers, wharf pilings, things that were going to be exposed to high weathering conditions. Millfab was making, residential molding, commercial molding. They weren't. I don't suspect them of being a source of pentachlorophenol use at this site.
Well, that's good news.
It's kind of taken us all a little, by surprise, because really that was, besides the VOCs, which I mean, I can't say that they're not at the site because we found them in other areas. But the pentachlorophenol is something that, kind of took everybody off guard, that was not expected at this site. How that plays out with the DNR, again, you're not forced to do anything by the DNR. They can't require you to do it, but we can't get this development started until we get the material management plan approved, and they can't approve the material management plan without some level of confidence that this is a one-off area of concern, or maybe it is all through this area down here. We just don't know. We didn't find it here. We don't know if we found it here because of some other elevated concentrations that skewed the detection limit high. Well, here, let me pull that up quick. So this is, can you guys see this table now?
Yeah.
So this is the pentachlorophenol concentration.
Yeah, if you could blow it up a little bit, it would be helpful. A little more.
That better?
Yeah, it's getting better. Perfect.
Let's see if I can. So this is the one sample that we found, super high sample. I mean, these are the standards under the DNR, right? So it's significantly higher than the standards are allowing. These are the detection limits. These are in line with what I would expect to see for detection limits, the center two columns, so we didn't really find anything here. This is the one that's causing us problems as far as this is test pit 1 down by the bridge. But again, I think it has to do with that rail spur more than anything. And this elevated limit is a function of the laboratory because of these higher concentrations that you're seeing reported down here.
Any other questions, President Hirsch?
Well, yeah, then back to the VOCs. What would be the cause of elevated VOCs?
So historically, this area where this building is was used apparently for painting and finishing of wood products. which are typically high volatile content, either paints or solvents that were used to clean up the paint. Again, that test pit that we did was, I want to say, somewhere about where my hand is circling, somewhere in this area here. This boring, they didn't find any concentrations of volatile organics. This one's not good. Not good. Over here, they didn't find anything that was in exceedance of a standard. So they may have found it, but it wasn't high enough to be of concern. So really, somewhere in here is where these VOCs are. And if this was a painting facility at one point that used solvents and whatnot, again, it's not surprising that you would have a release associated with those conditions.
Okay, one more follow-up question. For your remediation plan with respect to either the PCB and the VOC, is there a cost-effective way to eliminate these? Or, I'm trying to figure out how costly this might be, hoping that it's very contained in just along that southern railroad spur, but how much more would need to be done? You have to take out the soil completely and then bring it to a different landfill to,
So we originally had this in our proposal, for areas that were going to be excavated, and I know that we went through a couple of different reasons for the numbers that we had tossed together back then, and so this area and this area, I can't say that they're not going to be slightly more volume that might have to come out over in here. Well, this is actually where GP14 is. So this area is where we were finding the pentachlorophenol. If we're lucky, it falls within it. If we're unlucky, it extends further and we have to deal with it, but we won't know that. But again, part of what we did initially was to kind of overestimate the areas that we were going to have to be excavating in order to accommodate things just like this. So, I'm hopeful that we don't really, other than additional investigation costs, the remedial efforts going forward may not be substantially more, if more at all. I don't know that right now, but that's the best case scenario.
all right, thanks.
All right, Alderperson Hunt, and then Schumacher will be after that.
Can you hear me okay, Tim?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. I thought my audio might be goofed up. I was wondering, could some of the cause for the PCBs have come from the railroad itself deteriorating because they might have been treated timbers or something of that sort? And yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Next
And
question.
then if that were the case, would we expect to find that on those other spurs possibly?
So right now, let me go back to pull this up. So again, we don't have a lot of data. We have, one sample and another sample. But isn't it funny how both of those samples are awfully close to the rail spurs versus the two samples that weren't, right? So my first gut reaction to this is that this is associated with the rail spur. And like I said, I think that there might have been a timber of, included in the sample that was submitted. And the reason I'm saying that is because of this concentration. I mean, this is enormous for pentachlorophenol. That's significantly higher than anything I've seen in my 30-year career. Granted, it's not a common contaminant either, but 4,000, that is still super high. But I've seen it, right? 25,000, it's not common at all.
Okay. The railroad ties might have been treated with the PCBs?
Yeah, sorry, I need to make sure that we're clear. Pentachlorophenol is PCP. P is in Paul,
Oh,
C is in
okay.
cat, P is in Paul. And the only reason I'm making that distinction is because I don't want people to think that there are PC polychlorinated biphenyl problems out here, because we've not found any of those. So
Sorry about that.
that's all right. I want to make sure that we're all clear.
Sure.
Yeah, railroad ties were commonly treated with PCP as a preservative, right? We've all seen railroad ties, and they have that nasty, gooey. Everybody calls it creosote, right? So creosote is a method of preservation, but PCP was also a very common preservative.
Okay.
Any other questions, Alderperson Hunt?
No, I think that's fine.
All right, and Alderperson Schumacher, is your virtual hand tired yet?
It was getting there. I did take it down, but you must have seen it while it was up. So I guess I wouldn't get panicky until we see the rest of a different sampling plan on there. I mean, a one-off sample could be just a one-off sample. Like Chris is saying, maybe it just bored right straight through a timber, and that's what you ended up getting, and that's why it's so crazy ridiculous. And I guess we can't make anything until we know a little bit more of the sampling area around it, as far as whether that would be, how much would be, if it would have been diffused out from that. But I would think you'd have to have like a large pile of railroad timbers that had been sitting there for a long time in order to get a concentration like that. At least as far as the chemical goes, I mean, usually when to handle that chemical, it's usually decomposed either by, usually just by sunlight, or by, more likely directed UV light onto it. So you can get it to force it to decompose that way. You can methylate the compound also in order to force its decomposition, but that's a little bit more problematic. I guess I would just wait to see what the next sampling plan is in there. And there may be some things, Chris, in the field that might be useful. I know there are some either bioluminescent materials or chemiluminescent materials that might be a yes or no answer that you could get out in the field that would test for those chlorinated phenols.
Yeah, we have looked into those, and you're right, they are available. And again, it's not great, but it's better than nothing. The other thing that we have going for us is the laboratory that we use is, located in Madison, just up the road. It's actually on the east side of Madison. And sometimes, if we know we're going to be out here a couple of days, we can run those samples up to the lab and have them, run that sample as quick as they can, so that we have results back the next day, preferably before we leave the site. So, it might be two or 3 days of drilling that we're out here, and if we can get a few samples of, into the lab and back before we leave, then we'll have a much better idea. But yeah, that the bioassay products that you're talking about are actually, we're looking into which ones are cost effective and most efficient and useful, because sometimes, again, this is field work, and it's not a laboratory setting, so things aren't perfect. So we want the simplest one we can use, that's going to give us the best result with the most, as much accuracy as we can get.
I mean, I think one could be, like, if you can get the if you can get the chlorines to decompose off of it a little bit, I mean, even like a simple pool chemical test kit can give you at least a chlorination level. Again, you know, a very crude, very rough, like yes or no answer.
Yep.
But not quantitative anyway.
Yeah, and that's really all we're looking for is, you know, is it present here or is it not? It'd be great if we could have, yeah, it's very present, or no, it's not very present.
Right.
Right?
Yep,
but we'll see. We'll see.
Okay, I mean, I would say as also for a really cheap alternative to it would be look at for pool chemical testing, those sort of chlorination test strip kind of things. So that might be something super cost effective to at least give you a yes, no answer.
Yep. We will look into all the possible options.
Now, of other properties that you've worked on that would have had rail yards, rail spurs, just tracks in general, have you seen? I know you said that this is like outrageously high, and you might have just drilled straight into a railroad tie, but along railroad spurs like that, is this common to see this at an elevated level?
No, again, when the sites that I've worked at that have had PCP contamination are usually associated with sites that are producing these items. So they have dip tanks and pressure chambers and that sort of thing that cause the, you know, they're using raw material to inject it into the wood or get it onto the wood or whatever the case might be. So that's where we see those elevated concentrations, but to see something this high at a site that really the only source that we can, you know, make any absolutes about is the railroad tie issue. Again, you know, Milfab was a wood producing manufacturing facility, but you know, there's no reports of them treating that wood on site. They were finishing it, but they weren't treating it, and they wouldn't have been treating it with PCBs to be used, you know, in a molding type setting. Historically, prior to that, Wagon Wheel was out here, but they were there and gone long before PCPs became a common chemical being used. So again, everything that we're, you know, by process of elimination, you know, we're stuck back to this railroad tie really is kind of the only reason for it to be here.
Okay, those are the questions I had, and we'll wait to see what a new round of sampling does. And again, you know, I've got a fair chemical background and a lot of access to analytical equipment. So if I can help out with anything.
All right.
Will do.
You. Any other questions from alders? I'm not seeing any in the room. Anybody virtually have any questions?
I think Matt had a question.
Yeah, so we have a couple questions here, and I'll start it, and I'll turn it over to the city attorney. One of the things we were planning on doing, Chris, as you know, is close on the property with Kurt at the end of the month. So we have to extend the closing date, and we're trying to figure out what the appropriate amount of time we would need in order to do this. I think I heard 3 months maybe minimum. So if you could maybe give us a little clearer idea, and then I'll let Matt ask any questions that he might have as long as we have you here tonight.
Sure. Yeah. Again, 3 months is a very aggressive schedule. You know, I think we can probably get the data collected and get the report in to the DNR, but getting a response from them, you know, in that 3 month time frame might be a little difficult to do. Yeah,
we talked last week when we were informed about where we are in the queue with the DNR. Can you just maybe explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So it's not like we have it's not like we have to go back to the, you know, end of the line, so to speak. It's on their radar, and you know, if it's submitted, then it will take a priority. It may not be the number one priority, but it certainly will be at the more top of the list than not.
Okay, thank you. So I think Attorney Dragney may have some questions, and I don't know if Planning Director Shield has any, but certainly, go ahead, Matt.
Thank you. Chris, my first question is, when we talked about this last week, as I understood it, your next task was going to be to work with the DNR to agree upon the scope of the additional investigation that is needed here, and you were thinking that the DNR might agree to limit the scope of the investigation to the areas that would be disturbed during the phase one work, which, as I understood it, from your point of view, would, if the DNR agreed to that scope, that would allow you to move more quickly than if the DNR requires more extensive investigation. So is that still the next step? Is that still what you're expecting?
Yeah, so we got a response from the DNR as far as and I don't know whether you heard this or not, but they aren't going to require anything other than it being reported to them. The problem is that they're not going to approve a material management plan either until we have some delineation of the material of the contaminants of concern on the mill fab site, at least specifically in those areas that we're going to be disturbing during phase one of the development. So, Matt, I think what you're asking is exactly what we got from them. At some point, he may, depending on the material management plan, we had originally tried to do this material management plan for the entire property. And with this little hiccup, I think we need to back that off and focus on the first phase of the development so that we can keep that moving forward. And the Riverwalk corridor, trying to keep that on task as well. So I think that is where we're at, Matt, is that they're not going to require further investigation, but they're not going to approve a material management plan until they're confident that the data that we present to them is sufficient for them to approve that material management plan.
Okay, so now what I'm hearing is that you may be working towards the approval of a material management plan that is adequate to move forward with phase one and the Riverwalk, but then when we move forward with the next phase of development, we'll need to seek approval for another material management plan at that time, and we may need to do additional investigation at that time. Is that accurate?
Yeah, we may. Keywords being may is that, depending on what the data that we do collect from this round shows, we may not have to do additional material management or investigation for future phases of development.
Okay.
There is the possibility that will have to occur.
Okay. So what I'm hearing, Chris, is that you already know now, based on your discussions with the DNR, kind of what the scope of the work is that you need to do, at least as it relates to phase one. So, and what I heard you say in terms of timeline, I heard you just say that 3 months is very aggressive. I thought I heard you say earlier that maybe 4 or 5 months. It was what you were.
No, I had said 3 to 4 months was aggressive to do, and part of that is dependent upon availability for people to get out and do the field work, the drilling crews and that sort of thing, the laboratory analysis. Best case scenario right now, between getting on a drilling schedule, doing the drilling, and getting the analytical back, you're looking at anywhere between 4 and 6 weeks on the you know on the everything's going well side. So you take that and give us a few weeks to put the report together and get it in front of the DNR, and then their response. So you're looking at 3 to 4 months. I think the 4 to 5 that you heard earlier was in weeks. I think it was 5 weeks roughly between the drilling and the labs turnaround time, and then 3 to 4 months would be aggressive to get everything collected, everything analyzed, everything compiled, submitted to the DNR, and get a response from the DNR in turn.
Okay, so if you had to decide how far out you would establish a date by which you'd have DNR approval of material management and remediation plans completed so that the council could extend the date for closing this transaction, taking that into account, and you only wanted to ask the council to do it once, you didn't want to have to come back and do it a second time, what's your best judgment as to a reasonable date to push this closing back to?
Well, again, if everything goes perfectly, 4 or 5 months, maybe. If we find data that, requires us to do additional investigation, that 4 months becomes 6 months.
Okay, so based on what you know now, best case scenario is if everything goes perfectly, 4 or 5 months.
I would say that's reasonable, yes.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Did you have any questions, Director Shield?
No, I think he hit on it. We're certainly going to be needing to understand how this impacts the Riverwalk project as well, and the timing and working with our contractor that we have under contract for that project. We'll have to have further, deeper discussions about what can and can't be done prior to this additional site work.
All right, and then I know Kurt's on here. I don't, Kurt, if you've been talking to Chris, but certainly if you had a question for him right now, I would entertain that.
Well, the critical issue is right now is that
Can barely hear you, Kurt.
oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, a little bit more, and I will.
Okay. The critical issue is now the purchase agreement and the development agreement expire on Monday. And I was hoping that at least it was on the agenda tonight to worry about an extension. So there is nothing on Monday. We don't have some type of temporary extension moving out, and we can work on the other factors. Because what I'm dealing with now is I don't know what I got. And the interesting part about this was we're set to close on Monday because right now, as our appraisers tell us and our lenders tell us, the land is worth nothing right now because there's a severe environmental problem. So I'm going to catch 22. So we're set to close with cash on it when it's available. So once we have a sole management agreement and we can get that through, we can tie that in and get all the bonds and everything we need. What I've been dealing with is I don't know what I have. So what I was hoping to have, so we don't have otherwise everything's canceled on Monday. And we've all worked very hard with a lot of legal work and everything else to get it to this point and actually to go to a very expensive first building to set the tone for this. So I don't know what I have. We moved, everybody on this panel here moved hard. We normally we're going to get our SIP approved today. We moved that up to February 8th, so in case we had any hiccups, then we could do it. So the SIP is in, and now we have the few 100-page documentation for the improvements in to work through. So what I need is some predictability to where we can stand it out a little farther here with the contracts we have now, because I think there was some misunderstanding in bonds or letter of credit stuff. That's no problem we have. I just don't know what I have and what I'm paying for yet. Till I get a sole management agreement, then I know what that is. We will know what the roads are going to be probably within a few, Rodney will tell me because we set out the bids and everything of that. So what I need is some type of extension of the contracts we have in place now, sometime in the future by the end of Monday, or none of us have anything in place right now. And that's that. So, and then I don't know what I'm moving forward with on, or what do I keep moving forward on. So because what we've had, and everybody sees, our drawings are done, the SIP, and then I've got to determine, because the state needs it for 6 weeks to get the final permits. And then I need to know my roads cost so I can put that together. So the critical thing we need now was some type of way, and which is sad with it not even being as an item on the agenda tonight, we can't even talk about it, is that we can move it someday in the future with the purchase agreement and development agreement we have. But the other good thing that we have here in a positive sense is everybody's worked on this, and the city has worked on this for a long time. Once we get this figured out, we've got a great site with a great development, and what makes it even trickier, we're on the riverfront. So as we move forward, we'll have a great project. But my risky part is in the first phase where it is, because of where we're setting the standards of this design and development. And if the second phase is worth nothing, then I don't know what I have here. But all I'm asking for, we've got to take care of these contracts sometime, because if we go past that, what are we dealing with? Why waste all our time trying to put together another contract? Then we'll work this through. We'll get all this figured out. We'll be set to go, and then I get my first building started as that moves forward. And when it's ready to go, we'll start. So that's the critical issue to me, because right now I have nothing. I don't know what I have. But with the DNR denying the soil management agreement, they give us specifics to look at. When we figure that all out, that'll be good. We'll have a great site. But we're up against a technical default on both sides right here. And that's what we need to work out. And then we move forward. Because what we do, our SIP is approved. All the other parts are done. And then we're all the several hundred pages for the roadways to go in are set. And once we have the soil management agreement, we get that and we can finish the final bids on that, but we don't know where we're bidding right now. So that's what's critical to me. And I don't know how that's accomplished with all of a sudden on Tuesday. I don't have anything. So that's where it is. And it's just part of how a difficult site like this is. And it's just the way it is and works it out. But I just don't want us to get in something that says it's all canceled for no deliberate fault of anybody, but we're just trying to do the right thing. So that's where I'm at. I don't know if that's clear or if I was rambling or what it is. I think we all just want to get started and get these first buildings up and move along. That's where it is. But we want to do it right, make sure the environmental's right, and then we move forward and we got a great site. So that's just it, where I'm at.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from council members? And then I guess Attorney Dregney, go ahead.
Yeah, Kurt, this is Matt Dregney. So we have received draft amendments to the existing agreements to extend the deadline to close to the end of May. And my intent is to ask the council to put that on its next agenda. So that would be its first meeting in March. And we need the redevelopment authority to also act on that. Tim, do you remember when their next meeting is?
I think it's March 9th, maybe.
Okay, so the redevelopment authority would be acting on March 9th.
Yes.
And the council would be acting on
March 15th.
8th.
Well, the first, 8th, the 8th.
Okay, so if we stay on the current schedule, we'd have council approval on the 8th and RDA approval on the 9th for extending those closing deadlines and essentially reinstating those agreements. So I guess my question to you is that a concern to you if that's the schedule we're on? Are you saying you need the city to schedule special meetings and move more quickly than that in order to allow you to keep doing what you need to do, or is that
Well,
schedule okay?
If we go into where I don't know what I have to the middle of March where everything can fall apart, where I have no agreements, from Monday on until something's approved, I have nothing. So all I've got out is a lot of architectural drawings, a lot of paid for all the improvements for all the road work. I have nothing. And I can't risk that much more there because this whole thing may fall apart because everyone may say we don't want it. Here's not the third phase and everything else. That doesn't make sense. We got what we have here. We move it forward. If the environmental doesn't work out and stuff, we can. And I think May 31st now is too soon. Why should we come back? If we get everything back, we can close sooner because I've got to start as soon as I can to get my year building cycle so I can come on the market with these to market.
Well, Kurt, as you may know, I'm trying to get a meeting scheduled early next week with you and your attorney. Can we discuss this early next week, say Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, and try and sort it out then?
Already passed the deadlines of everything here. I don't know why this wasn't on the agenda tonight to talk about, so we could have voted on it.
Well, the reason
we knew last Friday that we weren't going to have approved soil management agreement, and it could have been on the agenda to talk about it. We could have extended. We could even extend 15 days. I am in total. I've got to stop everybody because right now I don't know what I have coming up to go back through this whole thing again here. We know directly from Chris what we've got to do. And I think we were all shocked by the thing that came back from the DNR, but it's a good thing. But I'm in total limbo. I'm sitting out there hanging in the wind with nothing. And I don't know what's going to change or what's going to go on this. So, we've worked well together on this thing here. And I was shocked that it wasn't on the agenda for tonight to do the extension, just extend what we have right now for at least 30 more days, and we can work out all that other stuff. Because we're void on midnight on Monday. All this work that we've done, all the redesign, the RNA, Plan Commission, City Councils, all the engineering, all that stuff is done because it says it's done. And no fault of anybody's part, but the contract's a contract. It's done. So I don't know why it can't be everybody knows this project, knows all the things, knows all the issues. RDA make a special meeting, City Council make a special meeting, or we'll just wait till it's done and we'll start up again. But you can't do May 31st right now because you'll be doing this whole thing again. You should take it out to about July 31st. If I can close sooner, the better it is. Because so that's why I'm sorry if I sound frustrated. I know you guys are frustrated. I just really wish it would have been on the agenda because you guys could have talked about it. Because you can't vote on anything that's not on an agenda, and I know that from my committees. But I'm just really proud of the project, and I know how we really went an extra effort to put a lot of extra money in the first buildings to really set the tone for it. Because my real risk is in the first buildings because we're setting a whole new tone.
That's what I'm going to say.
So I'm sorry, but no, it's tough. But if that's the way it goes,
All right, I have Alderperson Hunt and then President Hirsch.
I've not been terribly involved in the RDA project, but I sense that in order to keep the project happy and healthy and also to help Kurt deal with the situation, it sounds like we do need a special meeting. Not to be taking too much liberty in saying that I know how to go about doing that. But if we could meet before next Monday night when the contract runs out and get a decision to extend, I think then there would be room to continue to work on things comfortably.
All right, thank you. President Hirsch.
I completely concur with Alder Hunt. Kurt, I know you must be frustrated. Believe me, I think the majority of people on this call are very frustrated as well. It was a shock to all of us of these new analyses, and we want to work with you, Kurt. So let's figure this out. If we need to call a special meeting, I would be happy to do so along with the mayor, and if we can get it in with the attorney and everything, if we can get everything worked out, yes, we want to move forward. We want to continue to work with you, Kurt. You've done a fantastic job, and you've been a very great pleasure to work with so far.
All right.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
mean, if the council and the RDA, so we need the extensions approved by both the council and the RDA. So if they're willing and able to have special meetings this week, certainly we can accommodate that. We received today from your attorney, Kurt, amendments to the agreement, again, that go back to May. We may all decide that we should push it back a little later than that to late June or even late July, just so we don't have to do it again. But again, assuming we can get the people together and people are willing, sounds like there's a willingness to try and get that done.
Yeah, so I'm gonna suggest we shoot for Thursday night, and I can follow up unless you guys know now what your schedule is. It's really Thursday or Monday would be the other one, and I'll work with the RDA as well. I know some of them are on here tonight, so does anybody have a conflict with Thursday night? No conflicts? All right, so we'll shoot for Thursday night. I'll work with the clerk's office tomorrow, and we'll get a notice out so we can get that posted appropriately, and we'll shoot for, we'll try to do it a little earlier if we can, and then we'll get it out. We'll try like 6 o'clock, and we'll get it done.
Well, can we try to double up the meeting, have RDA at 6?
Yeah, we can do it.
Council at 7?
Yeah, we'll do them back to back.
And Dale's online too, so maybe.
Yeah. So that's what we'll do, Kurt, and then we'll send it out to your team as well. Hopefully that works for you guys. We can get you an answer at least, and then you'll have, a couple days to review it and hopefully sign the extension.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I
Okay.
can't wait the groundbreaking someday. So that'll be the fun part.
Yeah, we're all in this thing together, so we'll get to the finish line here. And anything else for Chris while he's here? All right, thank you, Chris, and you'll be hearing from us probably
Great.
very often.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
All right, thank you. Okay, we'll move into our agenda. Our next item would be the consent agenda. There's a few items on there. I'd entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I heard a motion by Jensen and a second by Reeves. Would anybody like anything acted on separately from the consent agenda? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda carries. Thank you. The next one is item number 6, which is ordinance 4 of 2022. And this one here is coming from the Landmarks Commission, which I believe is Alderperson Lagaki.
Mayor, are you able to put it up?
Yep, I'm looking for it as we speak. And all I have to do now is just share my screen. And there it is.
This is ordinance number 4 of 2022, amending section 3833 of the Historic Preservation Ordinance, Stoughton Municipal Code. Landmarks recommends approval at our February meeting. I so move.
This will be a first reading.
I'm not moving, I'm just introducing, correct?
Right, and I can barely hear you. Can you just kind of give us a quick overview of what Landmarks has been working on?
I am very sorry, we're having some heating issues here at home and you're hearing our heating in this old house. We made some changes in light of the mayor being able to, asking for more citizen involvement, and we just looked at our process by which we seek volunteers, people to serve on landmarks. And so you see the new language that we have recommended underlined and what we are suggesting come out. But it just is meant to reflect what is actually more going on in light of volunteers.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from alders at this point? Hearing and seeing none, this will be back at the next meeting. The next several items are going to be for Alderperson Caravello, and the first one is R35 of 2022. Alderperson Caravello.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is R35 of 2022, approving a conditional use permit request for an indoor commercial entertainment use as a fitness center at 318 South Forest Street, Stoughton, Wisconsin, and I so move.
Second.
I think it was Alderperson Schumacher. I'll let the clerk will pick one out here. Go ahead, Alderperson Caravello.
And this is a proposed conditional use permit to allow this use for a fitness center at 318 South Forest Street. It is Primal Fitness that has been operating there now for some time, but evidently they didn't know that they needed a permit to be operating for that use at that location. So that's where we're at with this one.
All right.
And it seems like a fine use of that location, I might say.
Okay, any questions or comments from alders?
No.
Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 And any opposed? That motion carries. All right, next several items are first readings. Alderperson Caravello.
And this is, as you said, a first reading. This is Ordinance 5 of 2022, creating Section 6-16 of the Stoughton Municipal Code. And this one, as was spoken about earlier from the person from Dane for Dogs, this is a proposed creation of an ordinance regarding breeding or possession of cats and dogs for research or experimentation, prohibiting that use.
All right, thank you. Were there any initial questions from alders? I see Alderperson Reeves has her virtual hand up.
Yeah, not a question, just a comment. I had actually submitted a request for this ordinance myself a year or two ago, and so I'm happy to see that the Plan Commission took it up, and Lawrence for his role. So thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? I've had a couple people ask me questions if this is in fact what you would call a puppy mill ordinance. There was some conflicting thoughts about what it was and what it was not. Director Shield, can you shed a little light on that?
Yeah, I certainly think that this is commonly referred to as the puppy mill regulation, as was suggested during the communication section. Dogs for Dane certainly have played a role in helping this author this and be involved in the development of this process. The city attorney's office has also been involved. Our office really took the lead after their initiation. So we're happy to see that this is being presented and unanimously recommend moving forward with it.
All right. This one here would be back in at the next meeting. Next item would be Ordinance 6 of 2022. Alderperson Caravello.
And this, again, is a first reading of Ordinance 6, 2022, amending zoning code section 78-904 of the Stoughton Municipal Code. And I think this is updating, really just generally updating some language to this. And I'm sure Rodney can give us more enlightenment.
Yeah, certainly city staff, our department noticed some language issues related to the zoning permit. The doubling of fees actually is has been adopted as part of our fee resolution by the council. This ordinance currently as written requires triple fees, so that's being corrected to match our approval resolution for our fee structure, as well as just miscellaneous recommendations related to the zoning permit language of the code.
All right, any questions on this one? Seeing none, we'll move to the next one. Alderperson Caravella.
Yep. Once again, this is a first reading, and this is Ordinance 7 of 2022, amending Section 78-920, parentheses 3, parentheses C, of the Stoughton Municipal Code relating to the cost of abating zoning violations. And I think this one has proposed, this was brought from Attorney Dragney to clear up the zoning, the cost regarding the zoning abatement language.
I'll just briefly mention on this. Yeah, we've been working on nuisance abatement issues, trying to address both some ordinance issues and some other issues, and so I made these changes during that process. I'll tell you, I'm expecting to come back soon, actually, with an ordinance to remove the nuisance abatement language entirely from the zoning code and just deal with it in Chapter 58. So certainly adopting this ordinance tonight is fine, but I expect to be coming back and recommending repeal of this entire section.
All right, any questions on this one? Okay, we'll move on to the next one.
And yep, this one is Ordinance 8 of 2022. Once again, a first reading, approving a general development plan for Lot 18 within the 51 West development.
All right, any questions or comments on this one?
This one was for, I'm sure Rodney can cover this better, but I think for the Lakestone properties, Lakestone management, the folks that are going to do the part of the 51 West development, they need this move forward, but there you go, Rodney.
Yeah, Lot 18, you've seen a general development plan proposal for this particular site in the past. One of the limitations that was on that particular approval was the fact that it was tied to the recording of the final plat before it would become effective. This really assimilates that previous action, but it changes the time in which they can submit the specific implementation plan and process. This allows them to move forward with the SIP process prior to the lot actually being created. The final action would still be conditioned upon recording of the plat and the lot being created as part of the plat. This just allows us to move forward with the next step for consideration of the specific implementation plan. The exceptions that are listed in the ordinance are very similar to the ones you saw for this parcel in the past. I don't think there was anything that was raised that created a specific concern by the Plan Commission. It did come out of there unanimously.
All right, any questions or comments on this one?
I'm sorry, it came out 6-1. I'm sorry, there was one.
Yes, it was 6-1.
Sorry.
I believe Alderperson Majewski was opposed to this one.
I have a comment.
Oh, sure, go ahead, Alderperson Zerkowski.
Before we see the second reading, there is an error on page 2, number 4. Principal, LE should be principal, PAL on the end. And sometimes that matters, so.
On this second bullet point?
It was on page, my note is that it's a number 4 on page 2, yeah.
Okay. All right, well,
just take a look at that one.
all right. Once again, even without a mask, we can't get anything past you. Alderperson Hunt.
Yeah, I was just looking at number 4, the following flexibilities.
Yes.
I was wondering what conditions require that many flexible alterations from our, it appears to me, from our usual zoning requirements. Am I
Yes.
right on?
Yeah, so the Plan Development District allows for consideration of standards for the site plan, essentially, that you would approve. If we were looking at a traditional multifamily zoning district in of itself, these are things that would not comply with those standards. So they're really shown somewhat as an illustration as to what they would be as an exception to the traditional standard. For example, the traditional multifamily zoning doesn't allow for more than one building on a single parcel. That's the first bullet. All of these are reflective of a comparison to that standard MR24 zoning classification. The PD district does allow for these to be incorporated specific to this site.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? President Hirsch, I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is not necessarily with respect to this development, but it is. When we did the Riverfront development and we came up with all this, we also included a number of criteria for buildings and stuff that has to do with sustainability. And this is just more of a general question for the Plan Commission is when do we start incorporating a lot more changes into how we look at development with respect to other sustainability issues, with respect to, reducing the impervious footprint, like, sidewalk, or not, like parking, try to get them more underground, green, building designs, energy efficiency and all that. I mean, I know it's a bigger question, but I just kind of want to know when we can start looking at that and incorporating it into more development.
Certainly those are things that can be considered as part of the zoning code. You'll even recall that as part of the Riverfront redevelopment, we looked to the City of Madison standards for the, I believe, for the EV ready parking and or EV ready for the building, and also I believe for the car charging station. So those are places that have incorporated them specifically into our code. So at some point we'll need to start contemplating what we feel is appropriate standards for our developments going forward.
So that wouldn't apply for this one, it would be when we go into the zoning.
I think it would be appropriate for discussion to contemplate changes to the overall code for those specific areas of interest to modify the code.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You had your hand and your virtual hand up. Thought you were going to jump out of your seat for a second. Any other questions or comments on this one?
I think Joyce has her hand up.
Is it still up from before, or did you have additional questions, Joyce?
Oh, she.
No,
right.
thanks.
Oh, you moved too. Okay. All right. So that one there was on as a first reading. So we'll go to next item is R36, and the next two came from Park and Rec, Alderperson Caravello.
You bet. This is R36 of 2022, authorizing the submittal of a state grant application by the Director of Parks and Recreation and the subsequent appropriation of City of Stoughton funds for a municipal flood control grant project, Stoughton Mill Pond Restoration. And I so move.
Second.
Second by Alderperson Doom, was it? Okay. Alderperson Caravello, go ahead.
And I'm just gonna, if Director Glynn is on and available, I'm just gonna let him tackle this one if you'd like.
Sure. So this is a grant program through the DNR, and it's there's multiple different types of projects. And our project would be repairing restoration on a water course, which is the Mill Pond Restoration as part of the River Park project. So the cost estimate for the mill pond restoration is $450,000, and then the match for the city would be $225,000. It's pretty straightforward. The Park and Rec Committee, recommended approval at our last meeting for this, but so I don't know if you guys have any questions. I'm happy to answer them.
All right, are there any
Hey,
initial
Dan,
questions?
I do have one question, Dan. Is this grant would be for the area that would be west of the bridge? Is that correct?
It would be the exposed area next to Uniroyal.
Okay. Okay.
Are there any other questions?
The first whereas
Alderperson-
reads a little bit weird in this or in the resolution. Just the wording needs to be clarified in it a little bit. I think there might be a carryover or something, duplication. Otherwise, that's it.
Okay, I had Alderperson Hunt and then Lagaki.
I'm sorry, I missed what Brett said. Was he referring to the first whereas being kind of garbled up?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, I had noticed that too. The other thing is, I was wondering, our $225,000 of matching funds, has that already been budgeted for?
So 100,000 of it was already passed in the CIP back in the fall of 2020 for the 2021 CIP, and the project's been delayed a little bit because we had the drought this past summer, and then the other matching funds are they were in the CIP this past fall for 2023. So that's 2023 is when the actual construction would happen. So that's when the funding would be needed. Okay. But yeah, they've been in the CIP and approved.
Okay.
Alderperson Lagaki.
That was my question. And just summarizing, Dan, you're saying that this project is budgeted in the CIP of 2021 and to be in 2023.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 And any opposed? None opposed, that motion carries. Next item is R37. Alderperson Caravello.
Yep, thank you. This is R37 of 2022, a resolution to support LRB-5204/1 relating to condemnation authority for recreational trail, and I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
I heard a second by Alderperson Hirsch. Alderperson Caravello.
And if he doesn't mind, I'm going to let Park and Rec Director Glenn take this one again, if he would.
Sure. So I think it's important to give a backstory on this. So prior to 2017, local municipalities and government units were able to basically use eminent domain for recreational trail purposes. In 2017, the state legislature passed, and as part of the budget process, there's a provision prohibiting the use of that for recreational trails and bicycle lanes and pedestrian ways. So in 2019, they tried to repeal that, some of the state legislature, and it failed. However, recently, State Senator Agard, she's drafted that bill, which is listed here, to give the local government units that authority. So this is something that goes back to when the state constitution was ratified, and I sort of give you guys in the memo some more background history than it's really needed, but it's really hurt government units as far as planning and developing recreational trails in Wisconsin, and it's just not hurting us. It's also hurting I know Dane County has a couple projects that they're trying to figure out new ways to get trails to happen and connect. And I guess our most identified issue of not getting a connection because of this is the river trail over by Cooper's Causeway, where there's two property owners, and we're not able to really even establish a line of communication with them. So it's just been really a stalemate with them, and we're not able to actually connect the river trail. So now we have two trail segments, and that are not linked together. So we don't even have a really with having eminent domain, it gives you you're able to have some leverage and create a line of communication at least to see if you can negotiate the easement or purchasing the land. So by not having a tool in your toolbox, it's really slowed down trails, and not even just in Stoughton, but regionally and statewide. So it's something like the Park and Rec Association has talked to different state senators and trying to get this bill passed, but I don't know where it's going to go. It sounds like it's dead, but I don't think it hurts the city council to support it and send it on to the state level.
All right, are there any questions? It looks like Alderperson Schumacher has his hand up.
All right, now I'm unmuted. Although I understand what the purpose of at least this bill is, and then going back to the concept of eminent domain, I can't fundamentally support eminent domain at all because it has been used too often for discriminatory practices, as well as for economically disadvantaged in moving them off of lands. So I can't support anything that supports eminent domain use.
Okay, thank you. Alderperson Hunt?
I don't feel quite the same as Brett, but I do feel like the constraints on eminent domain should be vigorous. It should be for projects that affect the public safety or the public well-being. And I am not against nature walks, but I don't see them as a vital threat to the community. And I also think that eminent domain should not be overused. And I would feel that my thoughts align more with the existing law than the proposed legislation.
All right, thank you. Any other council members? Alderperson Hiley?
I'll add a kind of point to that. I think that
Can't hear you.
we're
A little louder, Ben.
sorry. I think we're getting. Sorry, I'm getting a pretty big feedback on my own voice. I think the conception of this being for nature walks is a little bit off. I think if we're thinking about it rather as transportation, bike lanes, bike paths, bike trails, and pedestrian trails can be used for transportation. And there are certain key spots where, it would save bikers and pedestrians either a lot of time or make it very much safer for them to have a path to get from A to B. Our town has a lot of kind of choke points given our geography, and I think that's the kind of situation we'd be looking at is not using this with abandon, but I think having it in our toolbox when we're trying to, put a contiguous ribbon of lands together for public use, for the public good. I think that's the real goal of having this out here. And I'm going to vote in approval, obviously.
All right, thank you. I think Attorney Dragney has something to share.
I just can tell you from personal experience that this is a significant issue. I can think of 3 projects that I've been involved in the last 10 years involving bike paths. I can tell you bike paths are extraordinarily difficult to assemble all the property interests needed to make to make a bike path, to put all the parts together. And all it takes is one party who is not willing to grant an easement, for example, to create tremendous difficulties. You may or may not be familiar, for example, with the bike path that goes from the city of Middleton all the way down University Avenue to campus. Many years in the making to make that bike path work, and it is a significant transportation network for bicycle commuters. And I was involved in trying to acquire the last number of pieces for that, and without eminent domain as a tool, it is extraordinarily difficult. I have 2 other cases pending now with bike paths that are completed but are missing one segment in both cases to complete the bike path. And because of that one segment in both cases, you're just stuck. And so it is if you want bike paths, then you either have to be extraordinarily patient on the scale of decades to put them together, or you need eminent domain. I mean, that's just what I have seen in my own practice.
All right, any other questions or comments?
Joyce has her hand up.
Oh, sorry, I just stepped out of the room. We're just working on the volume a little bit. We're having a little trouble hearing you in the room, so the guys in the control room are working on that. But go ahead, Alderperson Tukowski.
Oh, I was going to say that I think everybody has made, all 4 of the comments are very helpful. When I was reading this and thinking it over, I was concerned too. And also I think sometimes this can become a divisive issue. So it is the one time when I thought I concluded that I think we do need this in our toolbox for the reasons other people have mentioned. It is the one time when I also think we would need even a fairly simple community impact plan with some upfront planning on making sure that our communications with the Stoughton are clear, so that our intentions aren't misunderstood. So I'm not sure how we can write that in or keep track of it, but that I think would allay a lot of people's concerns if it was, there was a real attempt to have some sort of communications plan explaining the what and the how and the why of this.
Thank you. Any other thoughts or comments?
So,
go ahead, President Hirsch.
Yeah, thanks. And I kind of reiterate what Elder Schumacher said, and Ben and Tukowski. I think that it is a good tool to have in a toolbox, but I like the language, and I wonder if we can provide more language to because this goes to the state, it's not our resolution. If we can provide some guidance for this, support of this to address what Alderperson Tukalski just said, is, to try to make sure that it's couched in with its transportation, as Alderperson Hiley said, and that it has to be really thought of before it can be and used, so we make sure that it is used not to take away land from, minorities and the other BIPOC community members. So I think we have to be careful with the language, but I do support it because there's some trails around town that, we can't complete because this isn't available, and we end up trails to nowhere. So I think it's important.
Yeah, and I would just add, imagine if they were to change the state law, it's possible that we could have our own ordinance on top of that to identify what alders are expressing here. But I think it'd be premature to do that now. But that's certainly something maybe we could consider, and then we can have that conversation at that time. So that would be my thoughts. And the other thing I would add is eminent domain is not used that often, and if it is, I think we have to do an appraisal and do fair market value and all those kind of things. So it's not like we're just taking the land. We are providing compensation, but sometimes, the landowner isn't really interested in that, but certainly we're not there just to, for the taking, and there is a process to go through, so we take it very seriously. I can only think of one example in the almost 11 years that I've been mayor and on council where we've done that, and that was when we did the public works garage expansion out there. So, even when the law was, we were able to do that, we really didn't, seek that opportunity out unless it presented itself. So I'm sure there were times where it was probably abused, but it's certainly not as far as I'm aware of in Stoughton. So that was my thoughts. I thought somebody else had their hand up. Alderperson Hunt, go ahead.
I think that the use of eminent domain, to me, while it's a helpful tool for accomplishing projects that we think will benefit the community, it really pits the powerful against the weak. And it's not just minorities or BIPOC communities. It would be anyone of any color who doesn't have the power to resist. And I find it important that property rights and the individual's desire to control their own property is a very significant and important right. And it shouldn't be, overtaken or overruled very easily. And that's why I just find it hard to appreciate. I would like to see if we could maybe get the wording and the process in front of the council so that we could see how we actually go about dealing with people when we want to use eminent domain. That might reassure me somewhat. But I've always been very reluctant to see the need, unless it really benefits the community's safety, to go ahead and use eminent domain. I understand the transportation of bicyclists in a safe manner is important. But still, I'm very reluctant on eminent domain.
Sure. All right. Anybody else?
I have a quick addition that I forgot to mention.
Okay.
And that is the importance of fitness in this too. And I'm going to bring up again the Wisconsin Healthy Communities designation. And that sort of proof that we as a community can work toward fitness is, I think, only going to increase in the next 10 years. So I don't know if that's an overwhelming point, but I did want to add that to the mix of what we talked about tonight.
Okay. Very good. And you have to pardon me. I'm used to looking for people unmuting and not raising their hands. So that's one thing I'm learning I have to do tonight is not look at the mute button. It sounds kind of strange, but you get used to doing things a certain way. All right, so I don't see any further discussion. We do have a motion and a second on the table to approve the resolution. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
And any opposed?
I'm
No,
opposed.
I think I heard 2 opposed. Is that accurate?
correct.
Okay, so that motion does carry.
I'm
Good
abstaining.
discussion. Sure, go ahead, Alderperson Lagaki.
I'm registering abstaining. I don't like what the yes no vote is communicating, and don't like what the no vote is communicating. I think that there's some creativity similar to how I voted on a prior thing with utilities. Thank you.
All right, thank you for letting us know. We appreciate that. But that motion does carry, and we'll see what happens at the state level. I'm not going to hold my breath on anything there. Next item is item number 14, and this one is coming from, it went through the Finance Committee, and there was no action taken, but we wanted to bring it here in case the council wanted to consider it. And I guess I'll let Alderperson Schumacher, if you just want to do an overview of what the request was.
Sure. So Thrivent, the last tenant in the senior center annex, had requested having an extension on their lease. I think we have them set to terminate at the end of this year, 2022, December 31st, and he was looking to get an extension into June of 2023. And we wanted to get to wait a little bit to see where Director McGlynn, there we go, would be with her fundraising to start on the renovations within that. And we had a little bit of time that we could wait and see how things were going before we really needed to make any sort of decision on this concretely. So as it stands, the lease would still terminate by the end of 2022. But if we do see things that may be delayed within the funding to get the annex renovations worked on, then we can also perhaps adjust this lease extension or consider it. So we just wanted to let things play out a little bit before making any concrete decision.
And I would just add what we heard from Director McGlynn is right now they're currently on pace on their fundraising efforts. We did have some conversation about if we could demo from one side of the building to the other when the time comes. Didn't really seem like it would save much time, and plus there would be noise for the tenant while they were there during construction. So at this point, the committee took no action. I would imagine as we get later on into the year, we can maybe get another update and see where we're at, unless somebody feels strongly about doing something different. There's really no action required tonight. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll just move on to the next item, and that's R38. It looks like the next several worked its way through Stoughton Utilities, and that's Alderperson Venegas.
Yep, this is R38 of 2022, authorizing and directing the proper city officials to approve the Stoughton Utilities Development Plan Review Cost Reimbursement Agreement and authorize the Stoughton Utilities Director and Stoughton Utilities Assistant Director to execute the agreement on behalf of Stoughton Utilities. Utilities recommended this 6-0 on February 14th. I so move.
And is there a second? Second by Alderperson Schumacher. And anything else you want to add, Alderperson Venegas?
Nope, if there's questions, Director Weiss is here tonight.
All right, any initial questions for Director Weiss? Hearing none, anything you want to add, Jill? I know you've been waiting patiently.
No, just wanted to share that this is an opportunity for us to better track going forward the impacts to the utility ultimately with development reviews. It allows us to ultimately capture our internal costs, which usually the project is quite far into it before we're actually able to do that. So we'll be able to track those costs and actually get reimbursed as opposed to the ratepayers covering those. So it's a great opportunity for us to recover all of our costs related to reviewing any of these developments. It also includes professional services we'd need on legal side or other engineering services.
All right, now are there any questions for Director Weiss?
Thank you.
Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 And any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. The next one also went through utilities, but I think it's gonna end up going through finance as well, if I remember right. You guys can help me as we get through this. Alderperson Venegas.
This is R 39 of 2022, authorizing and directing the proper city officials to approve the Wisconsin Department of Transportation state/municipal financial agreement for a state-led highway project. The utilities recommended 6-0 on February 14th. I so move.
Is there a second on this one?
Second.
Second by Alderperson Doom. Alderperson Venegas.
Yep, if there's any questions, I'll pass it over to Director Weiss.
Are there any questions on this one?
In your be it resolved at the end, you have state-let highway project versus lead.
You are correct. We'll make note of that. Any other questions? Okay.
Actually, it's in the whereas above it as well.
Okay, we'll clean that up. Anything you want to add, Director Weiss?
I guess I do. This agreement encompasses a lot of things. So there's actually utility costs because of the nature of the DOT project, the timing, and a variety of different things. When the DOT came forward, this is one of 3 segments ultimately that will impact us. But before, when the DOT did kind of their resurfacing work last year, we declined at that point in time to move forward with utility improvements, ultimately because it came at additional cost because the road base itself, we had to basically cover those costs. This opportunity allows us, they're going to do a full reconstruction. We do need to replace utilities through this corridor. There's obviously a significant cost that comes to the utility to do that. Basically, that project will be 25, 26, and 27 for the 3 segments. And so the action ultimately that I think, we were trying to capture here related to the Utilities Committee and taking it through them and their recommendation is really the impacts to the utility itself. I do believe this also went before Public Works for the action related to the road work and the city. And then ultimately, I think there's also the finance piece of it and the discussion as far as taking action at the Finance Committee. So didn't want to get ahead of anything or, necessarily recommending all aspects of the agreement, but just those parts of it that ultimately impact the utility.
Thank you for that clarification. I thought I remembered something like that, but any questions or comments from alders? Anything you want to add, Director Shield, as far as where it would go from here?
Yeah, Public Works Committee did look at the city component of it last week, Thursday. We did anticipate it taking it to Finance Committee, but in light of it going forward through the Utilities Committee, we expect to bring it directly to Council at the next meeting for total adoption.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. Any questions for Director Shield? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 And any opposed? That motion carries. Next one is R40 of 2022. And then this one also is Alderperson Venegas.
Yep, this is R 40 of 2022, authorizing and directing the proper city officials to approve the Stoughton Utilities easement release cost reimbursement agreement and authorize the Stoughton Utilities Director and Stoughton Utilities Assistant Director to execute the agreement on behalf of Stoughton Utilities. Utilities recommends this unanimously on February 14th. I so move.
Second.
Second by President Hirsch. Anything else you want to add, Alderperson Venegas?
Nope. For anything else, I'll pass it over to Director Weiss.
All right. Any initial questions for Director Weiss? Hearing and seeing none. Anything you want to add, Director Weiss?
Just a little bit unlike the developers agreement that you just have recent, approved, this one ultimately is to capture the professional services of legal review for easements. We've had a number of easements that come through where they've requested a reduction in the overall easement size. We internally review that. We see that as a customer, as a ratepayer thing for us to do for any ratepayer that were to come in and take a look at their easements or our utilities on their property. But the legal fees, we just want to have the mechanism again to be able to recover those fees because ultimately our city attorney reviews those documents that are presented from the property owner once that change in easement.
All right, any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
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 And any opposed? That motion carries. All right, thank you. Next item is Resolution 41, Alderperson Venegas.
Resolution 41 of 2022, authorizing and directing the proper city officials to approve the write-off of Stoughton Utilities delinquent account balances and invoices deemed uncollectible as of December 31st, 2021. Utilities recommend 6-0 on February 14th. I so move.
And is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderperson Schumacher. Alderperson Venegas.
Yep, I'll also pass this one over to Director Weiss.
All right. Director Weiss, anything you want to add to this one?
I do. This is an annual thing that we do. We take a look at and we try to recover actually all of our costs, all of anything that occurs. We just get to a point where some of these are not recoverable. There's a variety of different reasons. Some people have passed away, so that customer no longer is able to pay these. We have also a situation where we have customers within the township areas. We don't have the ability to tax roll. There's actually even a couple developer costs here that we were not able to recover. However, with this write-off, it takes it off of our books. However, we continue to try to make every effort to collect these. If we're able to, we'll bring them back to the books and actually get them paid. But it's just basically a way after we've went through so much effort, we don't see them as collectible at this point in time for a variety of different reasons. This is about 500 to 1,000, actually not even a little bit more than last year. But we're just kind of going through the process of cleaning some of these up. As you look at the list, there's accidents, vehicle accidents, those stem from either uninsured motorists or a hit and run. So we were not able to ever determine, who actually hit the pole. There's just, in the end of the day, we've tried many efforts to collect these, and these are the ones that we view that we probably don't have the potential to collect them. But again, we don't ever quit trying. And if those customers say left, or if there's another opportunity and they come back, we'll actually recover them when they actually get back into our system and become a customer again.
All right, thank you. Any questions on this one? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? That motion carries. All right, thank you. Item number 19, we may have a need to go into closed session. More than likely we will. And then we have a couple items to consider when we come out. Is there anything you want to cover in open session, Attorney Dragney?
Not really.
All right. So I would entertain a motion then for the closed session language that's on the agenda. If somebody's willing to make that. President Hurst said she'd do it.
Sure. The council may meet in closed session pursuant to 19.85 Parent 1, Parent E, to consider an agreement between Town of Rutland and the City of Stoughton relating to a water main installation and street improvements to Oak Opening Drive. And I so move.
Second. There's a motion and a second by Alderperson Jensen. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, I believe we have to have a roll call vote to go into closed session. So whenever Candy is ready, we'll do a roll call vote, and I'll stall for a little bit more. Tell me when you're ready, Candy.
I'm ready.
And I can't believe the whole meeting I didn't accidentally unmute myself. took great
You're good.
willpower. Go ahead and do the roll call.
Okay, Venegas,
Aye.
Tukalski,
Aye.
Schumacher,
Aye.
Reeves,
Aye.
Lagaki,
Aye.
Jensen,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Hirsch,
Aye.
Hiley, Doom,
Aye.
Caravello.
Aye.
Okay, so we,
All right, we'll be going into closed session. It looks like there's a few people that'll drop off and then I'll lock it. Do you guys want to take a break or do you want to keep going?
Keep going.
Keep going.
All right, I'm
Keep going.
hearing to keep going. Let me just double check the list. So I'm gonna lock the meeting here and then I'm just gonna check with the crew and make sure that they've got us logged off. Then we have to shut the doors. Yeah, you can just ask the guys and make sure they turn off the television.
Yeah, you did.
Oh, okay.